Hello, my name is Simonize and welcome to another Simonize Guide video. Today, we're talking about frequently asked questions from rogue players in World of Warcraft Classic. As a streamer, I get asked a lot of questions all the time when I'm streaming, so I think I have a pretty good idea what topics you guys want to hear about. So I've picked out 10 of them for this video that we can go over. As usual, let's get right to it. First up, we have a question: is Felstriker worth it in Ulduar? Now, this one has a little bit to unpack. Firstly, when someone asks if something is worth it or not, I can't really answer. Worth it is an evaluation of benefits versus costs, and different people enjoy and prioritize different things in the game. You tell one person an item simulates as a 10 DPS upgrade on their 9000 DPS character, and one might deem that as something that they must have, and another might say, who cares, this doesn't matter. I can't tell you what is worth it for you or not. Only you can decide that. Secondly, we can actually say something useful here that gets more at the underlying question. If I didn't have a Felstriker already on one of my rogues, I would not bother trying to get it for raiding. It's still super duper good for farming Karazhan if that's your thing, trying to earn some gold there. But I already have Felstriker on all three of my rogues, and in Ulduar, I only use it on Assassination rogues, and I only use it in two areas. First is on the Freya boss, specifically for the detonating Lasher phase. And the second area is the three big trash pulls before General Vezax, but only in 25-man mode. In 10-man mode, those packs have fewer enemies, and I don't bother with Felstriker. And specifically for that General Vezax trash, I'm putting Deadly Poison on the Felstriker and Instant Poison on my other weapon. Those enemies live long enough to let Deadly Poison tick and actually be good. Generally speaking, there aren't as many trash packs in Ulduar with a large number of enemies that make these Fan of Knives specific weapons like Felstriker super relevant. And also, the regular weapons that are available now in Phase 2 are stronger than the regular weapons from Phase 1, so you need even more enemies in a pack to make weapon swapping for AoE a good idea. Another common question is asking about the weapon speeds of the daggers used by Assassination rogues. People will ask something like, why is it that you're using double fast daggers? Why are double fast daggers best in slot now? And this question misses the mark just as much as people asking why is fast plus slow best that they were asking in Phase 1. Much more than just the weapon speed goes into determining what the best weapons are. Weapon damage, weapon speed, and secondary stats all factor into decisions of which weapons you should be using. A good general rule to follow when choosing your weapons for Assassination rogues is this. For the first dagger, you want one fast dagger, either 1.4 or 1.3 speed, and you'll put Deadly Poison on it and you'll put it in the main hand. You pick the highest DPS fast dagger that you have available to you. For the second dagger, it can be fast or slow. It doesn't really matter that much. Just pick the highest DPS second dagger you have, put Instant Poison on it, put it in your offhand. For the second dagger, if you can choose between a fast dagger and a slow dagger, and they both have the same weapon DPS, well then the fast one will be a little bit better. But if you've got a big DPS upgrade, just pick the big DPS upgrade regardless of the weapon speed. Nothing has changed about rogue theory crafting from Phase 1 to Phase 2. All that's changed is what daggers are actually available to us. If you want to get more precise about this, you gotta go to a spreadsheet or simulator tool, plug in your different weapon options, and see which one it tells you is better. You can find both a spreadsheet made by myself and a simulator tool made by the folks at wowsims.github, linked in my Discord, which is in the video description. The next question we have here is about using Rupture as an Assassination rogue. The idea here is that you would take 2 points out of lethality and put them into blood spatter, and then you'd prioritize using Rupture over Envenom as an Assassination rogue. Unfortunately, both the spreadsheet and the simulator agree that this is a bad idea. Both tools suggest that this is a small DPS loss in Phase 2 best in slot gear. However, if the best equipment you have available happens to include 4 pieces of Tier 8 set, giving you plus 20% Rupture damage, and you have an Arms Warrior or Feral Druid in your group for plus 30% bleed damage, and you make the talent swap of putting 2 into blood spatter instead of lethality, then Both the spreadsheet and the simulator agree that prioritizing Rupture over Envenom would be a small gain of about 10 to 40 DPS on your 9,000-ish DPS character, if you execute the rotation properly. Now, with the numbers out of the way, I could say, just plainly, I think using Rupture as an Assassination Rogue is a bad idea. Even in the narrow circumstances where our DPS estimate tools tell us it might be a DPS gain, you're adding complexity to your rotation for a really, really marginal gain, which I think is just not a smart thing to do. Next question, people sometimes wonder why I've got all my combo points ready, my previous Envenom buff faded, but I'm still sitting there waiting, not casting my next Envenom as an Assassination Rogue. And they want an explanation, what's going on? Well, I've got a whole video on an Assassination rotation, which I'll link in the video description, but I'll try to give a TLDR version here. That video will explain it in much more depth. So, after casting an Envenom, you want to get back to 4 or 5 combo points to cast the next Envenom. Sometimes it's going to require 2 mutilates, other times it's going to require 1 mutilate. Ideally, you would like to be able to cast those mutilates while under the effect of your Envenom buff, so they get increased chance to apply poisons. To be sure you can cast 2 mutilates if you need to before the Envenom buff falls off, you can just sit and accumulate some energy before casting Envenom. Done correctly, this makes a higher percentage of the mutilates you cast happen during an Envenom buff compared to just casting the next Envenom as soon as the previous one falls off. Anyways, check out the rotation video in the description for a more thorough explanation of your ability usage as an Assassination Rogue. The next question we have is, when should you use Vanish? For both combat and assassination, the best use of Vanish is always going to be to negate some kind of boss ability that affects your uptime on the target. With careful timing, this can be done on Razor Scale to not get knocked away by Wing Buffet, or on Oriaya to not be feared by Terrifying Screech. You can see both of these in the boss tips and tricks video that I've linked in this video's description. You could technically use this to not have to run out for Shock Blast on Mimiron, or to avoid having to go into a black hole on Algalon, but the risk reward on those is pretty bad. If you mess those up, you're dead. On bosses where there are no important mechanics to negate with Vanish, it will just be a threat dump for combat rogues. If it's needed, you may not even use it. For assassination, using Vanish will give you another overkill buff, which provides you 60 energy regenerated over 20 seconds. You definitely want to use this every fight to get that extra energy. However, it's pretty difficult to make this energy buff result in an extra ability cast at a specific time, like during a Dark Matter trinket proc or something similar, since it's spread over those 20 seconds. I prefer to use Vanish at the first instance where I need to wait to pool energy before casting an Envenom. I use it to shore up some suboptimal RNG that would result in some downtime of the Envenom buff in my normal rotation, like when I don't get a Ruthlessness trigger and I need to do 2 mutilates. This ulti can be used in the same way, helping to shorten that gap while you're waiting for sufficient energy pool to cast Envenom. The next question is more of a suggestion. People ask me, oh well, why don't you weapon swap mid-fight for wound poison on Vezax? This question gets asked almost every time I complain about having to use wound poison on General Vezax. The suggestion is to swap back and forth between an instant poison weapon and a wound poison weapon to maintain wound poison debuff, but still get some instant poison damage. This is actually a pretty terrible idea, and the reason it's terrible is because swapping weapons mid-combat resets the attack timer on both your main hand and offhand auto attacks. Effectively, this means you lose half of a main hand auto attack and half of an offhand auto attack every time you swap weapons in combat. This strategy would require you to swap twice every 10 to 12 seconds, and that would result in a pretty absurd reduction in the number of successful auto attacks, almost certainly obliterating your damage output more than just using wound poison plus deadly poison on your best primary weapons. Next up, we have one that a lot of people are really worried about. People will say in one form or another, they'll be like, help, I have 400 hit rating and it's way over the hit cap. What should I do to reduce my hit rating? They're so concerned that all this Ulduar gear has so much hit on it and they think they have way too much hit. This is a question asked by people who don't really understand how hit rating works for a rogue. However, that's fair though, because for many classes, any hit rating you have over the cap is completely wasted and does nothing for your character. For rogues, it's different. The hit cap, most commonly referred to, is the 17% spell hit cap, which ensures your poisons never fail to land. This is more like a soft cap. Hit rating beyond this cap is totally fine and good. It doesn't help your poisons anymore, but it still helps make more auto attacks successful, which increases your damage output. You shouldn't really be gemming for hit if you are already over the 17% spell hit cap, but at the same time, it's totally fine if your gear happens to have you at 400 or 500 or even 600 hit rating. That stat is still increasing your damage output. The maximum you can benefit from is the 27% physical hit chance cap, which is in the high 600s or low 700s, depending on what other buffs you have. You can see this chart on the minimum and maximum hit rating values that are good for a rogue based on if you have heroic presence from a Draenei, and or you may or may not have a spell hit debuff from a Moonkin or Shadow Priest. Next, we have a general category of questions where people are asking, oh, what stat is better, crit or haste or agility, or armor penetration or hit chance? People seem to love to think about gearing in terms of stacking individual stats, or which stat is better than which other stat. This is a bit of a misguided way to assess the gearing of your character. When you're talking about specific stats and which stat is best, you're really only talking about gems and nothing else. Gems are the only case where you're actually choosing one stat or a fixed amount of one other stat. Even then, the different stats usually have just very minor differences in their value per point, and also the per point DPS gain of each stat will vary based on your current gear, raid buffs, talents, etc. It's rarely going to make any meaningful difference if, for example, you swap all of your AP hit gems into AP haste or AP crit gems, since the value of each of those secondary stats is so similar. Many people think about these stats and are like, oh, I need to get this leg armor because it has a lot of haste, and the spreadsheet said haste is 0.2% better than crit, or something silly like that. When it comes to actual gear pieces and not gems, it's always much more complicated comparison than just crit versus haste, and is usually more like 30 crit and 20 agility and 100 attack power versus 25 haste, 24 agility, 90 attack power. Something like that is not answered by is crit or haste better, because there are many different stats being gained and lost. The relative value of those secondary stats is remarkably similar. They all increase your damage output. When choosing between different armor pieces, you should almost always choose the item with more stats rather than the item with particular stats. Again, just like with the weapons, if you want to get precise about it, you're going to need to learn to use a spreadsheet or simulator tool. Next up, we have a lot of people confused about why the heck I'm using Feint or when they should use Feint. Now, Feint does two important things. First, it gives you a 6-second buff that reduces incoming AoE damage by 50%. This is super duper important on a few fights in Ulduar, like XT Deconstructor, Algalon, or Mimiron. And on basically all the other fights, it's a very nice benefit. Secondly, each use of Feint gives a chance to trigger your main hand poison and enchant, effectively adding some to your damage output. Now normally Feint costs 20 energy, and just a chance at a berserking proc or a poison proc is definitely not worth 20 energy. However, if you use the Glyph of Feint, and I recommend all rogues to use this in Ulduar, it removes the energy cost of Feint entirely. With this glyph, you can just spam Feint as often as it's available and see a reasonable increase in DPS. Now if the boss you're fighting has a big AoE mechanic like Ground Tremor on Freya or Black Hole Explosion from killing a star on Algalon, you should pay attention to when those are happening so you're sure you can have Feint active to mitigate that damage. Outside of those situations, when Feint is just being used for damage output and not damage mitigation, many people will wonder, well, when should you use Feint? Is it better to use it during Envenom? And while the Envenom buff does increase the chance for Feint to trigger poisons, increases the chance that it adds some damage, you don't really want to ever wait on casting Feint to try to get it during an Envenom. It's actually stupid. Waiting reduces the total number of Feint casts you do, and almost certainly reduces the total damage generated from Feint. Just cast whenever it's available. Some will be during Envenom, some won't. It's all good. You're trying to maximize the total uses of Feint, to get the most damage out of it. Another common question I get is, what is the crit cap? What is the haste cap? Firstly, there's no such thing as a haste cap for a rogue. This exists for casters because they get messed up with a minimum global cooldown. For rogues, this doesn't exist. Stop asking about it, it's not real. Never again think to yourself, do I have too much haste? Because the answer is no, you do not have too much haste. For the crit cap, this is a thing, but it's a thing you almost certainly don't have to worry about. At least not until about Icecrown Citadel gear levels. Seeing as this is a question and answers video, I might as well explain it for you guys. A crit cap is the maximum amount of critical strike chance your character can benefit from. For abilities, this is always 104.8%, and outside of Lotheb's Spore buff, this is impossible to reach even in Icecrown Citadel gear. For auto attacks, the story is a little bit different, and this is usually what we're referring to when we talk about a crit cap for rogues. If you're looking at the chance to crit displayed on your character pane in the game, the crit cap for auto attacks against a boss enemy is going to be 104.8% minus the chance for a glancing blow, which is 24%, minus the chance for the attack to be dodged or parried, which is 0 if you're expertise capped, minus the chance for the attack to miss, which depends on your hit rating. What remains is the maximum amount of critical strike chance your character's auto attacks can benefit from. Assuming you're expertise capped and have the bare minimum of 237 hit rating, your crit cap would be about 66%. If you increase your hit rating, your crit cap will increase as well. Realistically, you're unlikely to have to worry about this crit cap until your gear is around Icecrown Citadel gear level. Okay, I know the video said top 10 questions, but I gotta squeeze an 11th one in. I get this question a lot. People will be like, Simon, I've got this weapon, and I've got that weapon, and I've got this other weapon. Which ones should I use? And bro, I do not know. This is a question for a spreadsheet or simulator tool, not a live streamer who is probably attempting to dodge fire, mines, shock blast, and laser barrage all at the same time the exact moment this question was asked. I have found that a lot of people simply cannot be bothered to open up a spreadsheet or simulator tool though. So, lucky for you guys, I have catered to your laziness to make a resource that is even easier to use than those tools. A little bit less precise, but still pretty good. I've made weapon charts with literally thousands of weapon comparisons pre-done in the spreadsheet tool and in a much simpler form. You can go to the Google Drive here, click on either the Assassination Dagger chart or the combat chart, then go to File, make a copy, then you can read the information page, or don't, get confused, go to Discord, ask a question, and be pointed back to the information page, whichever way works for you. Then go to the Your Weapons Options tab and input the weapons you have. The sheet will give you a list of all the pre-done weapon comparisons of the best combinations you have available, and it will show your estimated DPS with those combinations so you can see how much better different options are from each other. And that's all I have for this Rogue Frequently Asked Questions video. If you enjoyed the video, if you learned something, go down and drop a subscription on the channel, a like on the video, I'd really appreciate it. If you have questions you'd like to see featured in a future Frequently Asked Questions video, be sure to leave them in the comments section down below. And before you go, if you'd like to see me raiding in Ulduar, you can check out my live stream on Twitch, or you can check out the VODs from those live broadcasts hosted here on YouTube. I have a secondary channel where I upload all of those live stream VODs, which you can find in the video description. Thank you guys, and have a nice day. Thanks for watching The Simonized Show. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Can't wait for more sweet videos? Links are on screen that you can watch right now. Be sure to join the Discord server and pop by on Twitch to catch me live. Links to both are in the video description. Thank you for watching and have a great day.